So we're very excited to have our guest today, Ori Goldberg, who is a very internationally respected academic and pundit who's recently been making waves with his Substack, talking also about his experience with cancer and tying it into the current political situation. We're delighted to have you, Ori.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Okay, awesome. And but I just want to say you look good. Like you
Thank
look
you.
healthy. Yeah.
Well, this chemo doesn't, well, I haven't lost any hair, and it's usually more visible when I'm right. I mean, like for a day or two after it, I'm sort of yellowish gray. And then the side effects are less visible, and it has more to do with abdominal stuff and other forms of discomfort that you don't necessarily see on my face. But because of all the stuff I've had done, I lost like probably 60 or 70 pounds since I started this thing about 15 months ago. So there's always that perk. There's a very esoteric Israeli comedian who has a bit about how nobody ever gets to the gratitude part when they talk about the Holocaust. Nobody ever mentions the part where you're being hunted down by the Germans, but you stop at a full body mirror and you look and you're like, thank you, Hitler. That's the 10 pounds I needed to lose. Thank you. So,
I love dark humor.
so we're sort of, I'm there in terms of the perks of cancer. Yeah.
Well,
But
you
thank
look
you. No,
great.
I mean, I'm okay. I mean, I don't have, I mean, technically, and I guess substantively as well, I'm a stage 4 cancer patient because I have metastasized cancer, which means I'm incurable. That makes me stage 4. But first, I may be a Hallmark movie of the week in a decade because somebody will find a specific tailor-made drug for my cancer. And even if I'm not, palliative care, if it works well, can last you for people live for a long time. And when I say long time, I don't mean 18 months, decade, 20 years, whatever. And there's absolutely no way of telling. So I'm trying to soldier my way through it. Hopefully this stabilizes. I mean, I just ended the first stage of my palliative care, which means 6 rounds of chemo. Got a PET scan to see, excuse me, how the cancer is doing, and we'll play it by ear from there. I mean, my reward, if I'm good and the cancer behaves, is I get 6 more rounds of chemo because that is SOP now. I mean, as long as I can take the chemo, and that's what I get. If it responds well over a period of time, they'll start to decrease my dosage. If it doesn't, then they'll move on to less conventional and statistically less effective treatments. And then I'll move from being chronic, which is what I am right now in a sense. I'm a chronic cancer patient, to being terminal, but hopefully that's a long ways away. So as things stand, I'm on the good side of cancer so far. I'm not, dilapidated. I haven't lost all my hair. I'm not debilitatingly weak. I do things. I work. I write. I talk. So yeah, I guess I'm good. I'm actually. I used to post, just like I post on Twitter daily. I used to. I post on Facebook in Hebrew. And I was very political, very critical. And over the past 2 weeks, I've started writing a sort of a cancer diary, which has had real impact. I mean, people have been sounding me out about a potential book or something. So who knows? Maybe I won't end up a pundit. I'll end up a cancer guru and talk about accepting death as the key to living a meaningful life. So I don't know.
Could end up on Oprah.
Yeah, this has been a wild ride, but that's okay actually. Much better a wild ride than better to burn out than to fade away, right? Yeah, I think Neil had it right. So that's me.
You're doing
Great
amazing.
introduction. I I think it's a really interesting thing when people like stare that kind of stuff down bravely because like I said, it's got to be a pretty scary situation to deal with. So
I'm
I gotta give you your props.
Thank you very much. I think hamatzav, the situation, as Israelis call it, has a lot to do with it because I think one of the reasons I started writing about my cancer is because I really got to a point where it seemed like I couldn't write a single word in Hebrew that wasn't tainted or polluted or, immediately channeled into a kind of a genocide, yes or no discourse in which I had no intention of participating. I wanted to do something that I felt, would channel my energy and sort of be radical. And the most radical thing I had to offer, I guess, was me. So I ended up writing very exposed, very direct, very pointed stuff. But as I did it, I've been thinking about this for some time. But as I did it, I realized, a lot of us intellectuals have a kind of a built-in reticence towards dollar store new agey stuff, right? Talk about accepting death and a good life and meaning and the spirit and mindfulness and so on and so forth. But for me, I realized for all sorts of reasons that I had, uh, that I can accept the fact that I will die, likely prematurely. And it turns out that just being able to say that has a liberating effect, not just on me, but on cancer patients. I'm not talking to 5 people who are no longer receiving therapy for their cancer, who are waiting to die because they wrote me, each one individually, after reading my posts, and asked if they could just share insights when they had them. They said, we're not promising you a conversation because we're tired and we're sick and we're dying, but you got us thinking. And we don't know. It's weird because they pretty much all of them said exactly the same thing. We don't know anybody with whom we could necessarily talk the way you talk. So if that's okay, we can send you Facebook Messenger DMs, then we'd really like that. Okay, but it really is intimately connected to the politics. I posted a Substack piece today about how I now realize that I can see in the way Israelis are behaving the kind of urgency and very sort of stringent denial that people who are terminally ill have. They don't want to accept the fact that death is on the table. They don't want to accept the fact that they may have, that maybe something has happened, and no matter what they do, they won't be able to recuperate from it. And this urgency, I'm looking at Israelis now, and at first it was very easy for me to identify with people who said, Israeli Zionism is a death cult, and these people are death eaters and dementors. I wrote about that. There's zombies or whatever. But, looking at it now, what I'm seeing is major, major desperation. Sure, there's lots of celebration. The more Israelis feel besieged and beleaguered, the more they adopt a rough and tumble exterior and say, no, we're doing the right thing. But truly, there's a general sense that the country's going to the dogs. And that maybe possibly it has. Most Israelis, if you were to press them on what they did wrong, would probably not be able to tell you what they did wrong, but they know that something is wrong. Something is off. This isn't a good thing. It's very clear to them that the fact they get contradictory news every day, all day about how great Israel is doing and how not great Israel is doing and how Israel is taking over the Middle East and how Israel is being pushed out of Lebanon and Syria. And everybody here is in a frenzied tizzy, and that is not supportive or conducive to life. So, I'm looking at it now, and I'm really seeing people in sort of very severe denial. They're not death eaters. They're actually clinging to life as powerfully as they can. But that's because I've got this cancer patient perspective.
I think that there's something to that. Like this is something that I say not and don't get me wrong, because this is an outside looking in situation. It's kind of a situation the Jews have faced for a long time, is an existential fear of everyone is trying to destroy me. And kind of that cornered feeling has produced a lot of resentment in the Israeli culture in general, and this feeling that any kind of criticism is another attempt to destroy me, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I think you're absolutely right. And I think, I can see you and raise you and tell you that this has a lot to do with, for example, the
Or it's not unfounded.
no, 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 no.
There was a lot in history there.
No, no, of course, but this has a lot to do with the kind of wild and crazy embrace of, tech bro capitalism among, say, American Jews and among the new robber barons, as what's his name? I forget the name of the journalist who writes about these guys, but I know he's writing a book called The Nerd Reich, which I think is a great name. These people, it's not for nothing that they are fervent supporters of Israel. And Israelis in general and Jews in general like to latch on to this need that capitalists have to present capitalism as the way of the world, the natural order. This is how it is. People who are on top are on top. People who should be oppressed, they deserve being oppressed. So Israelis will latch on to that. They'll do anything they need to do in order to be able to carry on with this faux public life that we have now, as long as it doesn't involve commitment or change, or we have to be completely justified and vindicated all the time by everyone, and anyone who doesn't do that is an enemy. And really, I don't have to tell you guys, I mean, the level of dissonance is probably as severe as I've ever seen it, not just with regard to Israel, but generally. You got people, I just saw this British professor at Goldsmiths who tweeted something about how the world thinks it's only right to kill Jewish children because they're Jews. When Israel kills Palestinian children, it's just because they have to, and because Hamas uses them as human shields and whatever. Things don't change. People are like cleaved into this groove, and they don't seem to be able to let go of it. And really, I mean, where my sort of cancer experience comes in is that I see the urgency there. I see the inability to give up, this illusion of control. If we work hard enough, then we can cheat death effectively. And I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's working. I think the more Israel digs in, the more its supporters dig in, the more we're looking at an honest to God revolution in the making. It's already here in many ways. Despite the fact that Israel continues to kill, continues to burn, and continues to bomb, things have already changed. Oh, by the way, that's also part of the Israeli malady. It's like we're always talking about what might happen, what could be. We got to watch out so we don't end up like them. But we're already way worse than they are. Everything that could happen has already happened. Everything that's happening now is rotten cherries on top of rancid icing, but the cake is already there.
So, what we really want to talk to you about is something that I think you have more insight into than anyone else, and that is what on earth is wrong with Israeli society today, right? Everyone sees all these videos of Israelis delighting in the suffering of Palestinians, mocking it. Everyone sees these videos of the IDF executing people, stories coming out from Palestinian prisoners of being sexually abused in prisons systematically. I could just go on and on. Israel occupying country after country, taking over zones, including countries that have just professed peace, like Syria and their new government. There's a genuine sense that something is deeply rotten in Israeli society. For myself, I grew up in Israel at a time when I felt that our society wasn't completely rotten. And now grew up in the 80s, and that wasn't my feeling at all. I remember a certain amount of caring in society of Jews towards each other, first of all, which I think there's a lot less of now. And also a lot of one day we'll have peace, one day you won't serve in the army, songs about peace. That was at least an important side of Israel, even though all the ugliness was there, but there was that too. And now I look back and I can't figure out if just the ugliness was always the real Israel or if we have gone through this horrific transformation. And I really want to get your take on that.
That's the $64,000 question, obviously, for us intellectuals and scholars and researchers and pundits, because the horror is most definitely there. I mean, what Israel is doing right now is such a horrific mix of indifference and bile and murderousness and just weird solipsism, and it's all there. I mean, and I, for one, I mean, I've been writing about this for the duration pretty much daily, and I've gone through various stages, which I guess are kind of like, the 5 stages of mourning. And I've finally reached the understanding that I'm not Palestinian. And no matter how aware I am of what Israel and Israelis are doing, I can't speak as a Palestinian, and I can't condemn Israel as a Palestinian. So this question that you're asking, I feel, is my question, your question as well. Perhaps where we can do some good. First of all, I'll have you know that a book is being written, not by me, but by Omer Bartov, who's a professor of genocide at Brown. He's writing a book that will be out next year entitled Israel, What Went Wrong, where he's going to be talking about his life and snippets of history and how he grew up and indoctrination, and doing it in a sort of a light professorial mode. I was kind of supposed to write that book, but then I got cancer, so they decided to go professorial, but it's okay. So if anybody doesn't like the answers I give and the questions you ask, wait for April 26th and read the book. Did Israel go through a transformation? No, I mean, I think probably not. I mean, more like a radicalization than a transformation. Because I think you're absolutely right. It was all there. And Israel based itself on the disenfranchisement of the Palestinians and on making the Palestinian narrative and the Palestinians themselves disappear from view. I mean, we're talking about specific projects funded by the Jewish National Fund in the 1950s, where millions of trees were planted over the ruins of Palestinian villages all over Israel to make sure that they are just not a part of the collective memory, that they're just not present physically. We're not just talking about a battle of narratives. We're talking about a very physical enterprise undertaken to delete Palestinian memory and to make sure it doesn't make any claims on the land and on political life. So that was always there. And Israel, in a lot of ways, the Israeli economic miracle was also based, as many colonialist endeavors have been based over the centuries, on the work of the oppressed locals who had to work for their new overlords and get paid in whatever scale the overlords decreed was a just one. And the people who are responsible for the Israeli building boom of the 70s are Palestinian laborers who came in from the territories occupied in 67. There. And in a lot of ways, the occupation of the Palestinian territories is the greatest act of state that the Israeli state has ever undertaken. And it devotes a great deal of its resources and a great deal of its efforts. And that constantly grows, it expands, even when we don't take the last 2 years into account. So it was all there, and I'm not saying that as an excuse, I'm not using it as an excuse, but as you say, it wasn't talked about. It wasn't talked about. It was the quiet part. We didn't enjoy saying it out loud. Even the people who supported it, and I think a lot of Israelis supported it, there was an understanding that there was something wrong about it. There was something potentially shameful about it. We, especially as Jews, should not be oppressing others. We should not be Herrenvolk, a race of masters, because we know what it means to be oppressed by a race of masters. Well, people served the occupation constantly and continuously and without any qualms whatsoever. It just wasn't a thing. But over the last 15 or 16 years under Netanyahu's leadership, the Israeli right, and there's a difference between the religious right and the non-religious right, but for the purposes of our discussion, it's pretty much the same. They had a plan, and the plan was to make the Palestinian problem go away, which is not code for ethnic cleansing, but rather a striving for what we like to call normalization. We would get Saudi Arabia, that was our holy grail, but the United Arab Emirates are also good. We would get them to establish diplomatic relations with us, which would bring a lot of other Arab countries that are dependent on their support. And the Palestinians would either have to accept their place as second-class citizens in a single Israeli state, or they could leave, because as Israelis will often tell you, they've got whatever 52 states. I forget the number they quote. Why do they have to stay here? So we thought that Netanyahu, as much as he was disliked, as much as his personal demeanor was doubted, we thought that he had this in the bag because he kept talking about it. And then Trump won. We thought You remember that New York Times cartoon where he was leading Trump on a leash, and that was his propaganda. He was telling all world leaders what to do. And a lot of Israelis thought that it may not be pleasant, it may not be good, but the Palestinians are okay, and we'll just normalize this, and everybody will accept the occupation, and Israeli apartheid will be safe. And we thought this pretty much until October of 2023. Okay, that was the vibe, that we were going there. And then on October 7th, Hamas carried out its massacre, its great attack, which was part military and part full-fledged terrorism directed at citizens, meant to sow fear. And I don't think it was ever meant as a genocidal attack. I don't think they actually meant to take Israel over. They acted alone. They had no help from potential partners like Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Islamic leader in Iran. I think they meant to put everything on a single attack because they felt like the Palestinian issue was going to be finally buried, put away and buried, normalized, if you will. The Palestinians were no longer going to be an anomaly. They would be presented with a set of facts, and they either accepted it or they wouldn't. So they carried out this attack. And while Israel likes to call attention, rightfully so, to the many hundreds who were killed that day, some of them horribly, we have to mention the fact that Hamas defeated Israel militarily with pretty much no means whatsoever. This was also a military attack. Hamas took 3 heavily armed, fortified Israeli military bases and took them very easily, controlled them, killed all the soldiers, killed the officers, carried out what was, in strict military terms, a brilliant operation. They knew what they were doing. And this isn't just because they took the billions that they were given from Qatar or wherever and used them to build a super weapon. They didn't have a super weapon. They didn't have any weapons. They had tunnels in Gaza. But they beat the glorious IDF in a pretty much a David versus Goliath scenario. So that happened. And then so many people died. And there was an Arab invasion in the Israeli heartland. Okay, and there were rockets. The rockets were accompanied by something that I think 3 or 4 generations of Israelis have never seen. Okay, no, I'm exaggerating. Let's say 2, because the last war where Arab militaries invaded Israel was in 73. So we're saying 50 years. But for 50 years, nothing like this had ever been seen. And even then, we'd been invaded at the periphery. And this was very close to the heartland. So Israelis were shocked. I mean, we'd been told that this was going to be taken care of, that this would be normalized, that we could continue living our lives and not saying the quiet parts out loud and knowing what was happening, but doing our bit for the war effort or shutting our eyes and thinking of England or whatever. But it would be okay in the sense that nobody would think we were doing anything wrong. And even if they would, they wouldn't say it out loud. Because they owed us, because we were special, because we had impunity. We can talk about that later if you want. And this attack shook us to our core, not because of just the death toll and the immensity of it, but because it really shattered everything we thought about ourselves. Now, a lot of Israelis are calling for a commission of inquiry and finding out who was responsible. That's, pardon my French, but that's just crap. Everybody was responsible. Everybody going 50 years back. Why? Because the entire system was structured around the idea that whatever those pesky Palestinians end up doing, we will be able to set them straight because they are our subjects and we are their overlords. You can't really expect them to defeat us in any way. But they defeated us. So we took a very, very, very sharp turn, almost 180 degrees. And suddenly it was okay to say the things that nobody had said before. Suddenly it was okay to say, well, these are the Palestinians' true colors. Okay, they've shown them now. All they want to do is kill Jews. And they're animals. Left to their own devices, they would slaughter us, dismember us. I worked for a while before I got sick at a small think tank that, of all things, did Israel-China relations. And I had my boss, who this operation was her brainchild. She was a very smart, capable, older American woman who operated this business on donations from even older Americans. And she seriously told me at one point, when we had political arguments all the time, she seriously told me at one point that it's much, much easier and much more moral to die in carpet bombings than it is to die when somebody slaughters you with a knife in a kibbutz. That it's okay as far as she's concerned, mathematically, to kill 1,000 Palestinian children by carpet bombing them to death for every Israeli child that was slaughtered in the attack. Which, of course, by the way, we've passed that mark significantly because very few children were actually slain in this attack. So we flipped. We basically flipped. I wanted to explain this in a lot of ways over the past 2 years. I had this theory that our id changed places with our superego. Our superego got pushed into the netherworld, the murky depths of our collective psyche, and we were suddenly looking at wild, half-formed fantasies as full-fledged working plans for how to deal with the Palestinians. Maybe partially true. There was revenge there. There was fear there. But ultimately, and I'm going to stop rambling with this, but this is an important point. When you practice genocide for a long enough time, it changes you. You can't expect to do this for 2 years and not be radically altered. I don't think we were necessarily radically altered when it began. I think we are radically altered now. And we haven't become monsters. What we've become is two-dimensional. Everything is a zero-sum game. They die, so we live. They're animals, we're human beings. They cheat, we're honest. The world is anti-Semitic, we are honorable and fighting the Judeo-Christian fight for a better tomorrow. There is no in-between, there's no middle ground, there's nothing to talk about. You're either for us or against us, and that's it. You can't say anything even slightly middle groundish without drowning it in so many disclaimers that you can't remember what you said in the first place. That's how you talk here. That's Israeli discourse now. That's the most radical change that we've undergone. We've erased our own humanity. We've negated an entire dimension of being. And we did this because we've been dehumanizing the Palestinians for such a long time. And for 2 years, we've been massacring them. We've been slaughtering them by their tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands that we ended up inhuman ourselves. And I could have saved us 10 minutes of rambling having just said that, but I needed to set up. This is the punchline, but I needed the setup. This is what happened, but it happened because of all of the reasons that I tried to outline in my spirited monologue.
Thank you so much. How you talked before about an insecurity that Israelis have underneath this. So how do you see that dynamic between the zero-sum game, two-dimensional front and the gnawing self-doubt? Because I think the gnawing self-doubt is something that Israelis are very aware of and foreigners are not, right? All my WhatsApp groups, I have several WhatsApp groups like every Israeli, some with more right-wing, some with more left-wing, some with centrists. Every single one of them would agree on one thing. We're going to hell in a handbasket. Everything is going badly. They just disagree on why. Is it Netanyahu is a traitor? Is it we're being genocidal maniacs? Is it corruption? Is it whatever? But they all agree that things are terribly, terribly wrong. So expand on why Israelis feel this insecurity and how what the dynamic is between that and that two-dimensional element that you talked about before.
I'll try. So the first reason is that living here has rapidly become very difficult. Prices are rising hysterically. Food prices. You go to the supermarket. You go to the grocery store. You go to restaurants. You can't go out and eat at a reasonably priced restaurant. I'm going to say in Tel Aviv, but it's true in other places as well, for less than 400 or 500 shekels, which is unbelievable. A shekel is 3 shekels, 20 is $1. Okay, that is a lot of money, and wages don't increase, and the public infrastructure crumbles. And if you have school-age children, which I only have one, I mean, my kids are older, but I only have one. But in school, every day classes get canceled because teachers are paid peanuts. So they have to take care of their own children whose classes are canceled as well because there are no teachers. Because you can't recruit teachers. 'Cause people don't want to be teachers. And the number of people who've left Israel is astounding. And people who are applying for foreign passports. And roads are crumbling. And we take great pride in the fact that NVIDIA just signed a contract to build a campus in Israel. But an NVIDIA campus, it might be worth 2 billion shekels, is not enough to hold a country in place. So the reason people feel like the country is going to, and of course I haven't said anything about the fact that we're going to be paying a lot more taxes next year, but getting much less service, and that people like me, secular Israelis who don't have cancer, can safely expect to spend up to 3 months a year doing reserve duty, securing all of Israel's quote unquote achievements in the Middle East. Life here is unbearable, and of course, it's much better to be Israeli than it is to be Gaza or somebody from the West Bank. But in comparison to what Israel was 2 years ago, people are freaked out because life here is deteriorating very rapidly. It's physics. Okay, it's not a spiritual thing. Very few people
It's
are. What's that?
I was just going to say it's something that Austrians talk about a lot in not the Austrians, the Austrian economists when it comes to war is that the cost on the actual people waging the war is not talked about enough. The way
Yeah.
it depresses an economy, the way that all the resources get pushed towards the war so the people suffer, the way that, the security apparatus and the information apparatus all gets clamped down really tight so people don't get information in the way that they usually do. People don't get, all of the things aren't flowing, everything's clamped down, everything's so tight knit like that, so because you're on a war footing, and you tend to, basically get occupied yourself from your own government.
Yep. That is a very apt description of what's happening here. And I think a lot of Israelis will have a kind of a Chinese firewall between knowing what's happening in Gaza, knowing that Israel is carrying out a genocide, knowing that war crimes are being committed, and actually thinking that these war crimes should generate social or political change. Because it's war, and at war, Israelis rally around the flag. And this was never more apparent than it was during the 12-day war with Iran, which really is just a delusion. I mean, it's a surrealist film. We got nothing. We had no achievements. We took a very serious hit to the heartland and to very specific Israeli Air Force bases. Yet it was presented as a victory, and the Israeli press is now saying that when Netanyahu goes to DC next week, he's going to present Trump with more scenarios for attacks in Iran, which he may do so, but I really don't see Trump attacking in Iran anytime soon. And maybe that's another thing. It's not just hard to live here. Just like you said, Daniel, there's a cognitive dissonance here. Okay, and it's very even if you can't put your finger on it, you can tell when things are off. You can look at a scene and know when things are off. Prices are not supposed to be so high. You know that your national broadcasting networks are not supposed to have 14 hours of news every day. And you also, you can read the papers. You don't have to be a linguist and have an academic specialty. You can read the papers and realize that this is bullshit, that this all can't be happening at once. So I'm not surprised at all that Israelis feel that way. But the weird thing is, and this is, I think, where Israelis latch on to the official narrative, is that the new doctrine of Israeli security that's being pushed forward by Netanyahu is not about anything specific. It's not about It's not about there not being a Palestinian state. It's not about taking over Lebanon. It's not about taking over Syria. It's about ensuring Israel's right to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, to whomever it wants, for as long as it wants. Only if we are allowed to do that officially, if we're given official notice by the United Nations, by our patrons, only then will Israel be secure. And that's great because Israelis don't need, they don't get a specific story. They actually have to sign on to insecurity and uncertainty as the order of the day. As long as we can shoot up anybody we want, as long as we can kill terrorists in Lebanon with impunity as long as we can send ground troops into Syria, which we do on a regular basis, and everything is okay. We decide what we're going to do. That means we're secure. We don't need the anti-Semitic world. And that, I think, is where Netanyahu is such a masterful politician. He understands that. He understands how to talk to Israelis. He understands what Israelis want. He's Israeli. He's not this incompetent fool or madman, even though he is a little mad, but then again, so are we all. He knows what's what. And at this point, the only thing Israel can stand for is this security where you get to do whatever you want and be a
As an
threat.
American, let me tell you, it's not very secure.
Well, yeah, totally. Totally. And also, I follow as much as I can the American press, and I watch Jon Stewart and John Oliver and people like that. And I see the statements being made. And it's not just Trump. I mean, it's a Democratic Party as well. You have a leader like Chuck Schumer talking about how the Democrats caved on the government shutdown. Dude, that's just weird. I mean, Jon Stewart did a montage, which I found particularly funny. He's a New York Giants fan. And he had a montage showing how the Giants and the Democrats justified their losses in exactly the same way, which was hilarious. It's like, no, we'll do better next time, and we're trying to learn. And at one point, you had Chuck Schumer going, "We will win. We will win." Something's wrong, you know? I mean, Trump, obviously, other than being a very, very bad, hostile president, is also one of the weirdest guys I've ever seen. Like, really weird and creepy. Not just bad at his job, not just a fascist, okay, but weird and creepy. RFK Jr. is weird and creepy, not just bad at his stuff. So you look at these people, and I think a lot of Americans will vote the ticket anyway. But I think many more Americans look at them and they're like, we don't deserve to live in a country that's led by these weirdos. Okay, so in a lot of ways, the same thing is happening in Israel, and it doesn't matter if it's Netanyahu or anybody else. Israelis know it's weird. But then again, Israelis are also completely docile when words like security are used. Actually, security is the one word which, when used, puts Israelis at attention. Because security is the one thing that's supposed to be apolitical. Okay? Security is above politics. By the way, the best compliment you can give an Israeli politician is that he or she are behaving in a non-political manner. That says that they're good at their jobs. Why? I still don't know, but that's the way it works here. So what you've got, returning to your original question, Shael, I rambled. What you've got is people who are very much aware and very much uncomfortable with what's happening, but who have absolutely no solutions and who still snap to attention whenever the security issue is raised. So you've got something like the Bondi Beach attack. Everybody, and I mean everybody, will tell you immediately that not only was that an anti-Semitic hate crime, but it was orchestrated by Iran, and it was, there are Iranian operatives working in Australia, and it's the Australian government's fault for not defending Jews, and the entire Jewish community in Australia is considering immigrating to Israel as if. Okay, so you get this crap constantly. You get this bile spewed constantly, all the time, making an enormous amount of noise. So Israelis latch on to what they know, and they know security. Okay, but the problem is that the defenses that we once had, some of them made out of pure courtesy to ourselves, not saying the quiet parts out loud, we no longer have them. We no longer possess filters. We no longer have a collective memory. We don't remember stuff. I don't know if you recall this. Even a few weeks ago, there was the IDF executed 2 people they'd been chasing, 2 Islamic Jihad terrorists, if you will, and there was a video that showed the execution. They told them to go back in the building and then just shot them and kicked them. And Israeli Twitter was agog. People were talking about how this shouldn't happen, and there was an argument about whether we're moral or not, and whether we can stomach something like this. A lot of people said the very fact that we're so outraged by this is indication that we're moral. This happened on a Thursday. By Sunday, nobody remembered that execution. The IDF chief of staff said an incident like this deserves a deep investigation. Nobody remembers that took place. The lieutenant colonel who commanded the battalion that shot the 3 hostages who escaped from Gaza. Remember that the IDF shot 3 hostages dead. They escaped. They talked to them for 15 minutes, and a sniper in a faraway building just shot them because that was the standing order. So the lieutenant colonel who commanded the battalion who did that got promoted just a few days ago. Why? Nobody cares. That is what genocide does to you. Genocide makes you lose any kind of filter, any sense of proportion, any real memory beyond the immediate present. There's no past, there's no future, there's only now. So that's the killer combo. Okay, we weren't genocidal, I think, not in the pure sense, before October 7th, 2023, and maybe we weren't genocidal December 2023 or February 2023, but by February 2024. But come June 2024, we were genocidal. Okay, and the more genocidal we got, the more it became the only thing we did. The more it became its own justification. The more we lost the ability to reason, to think, to occupy some kind of middle ground. And I'm not talking about peace, but just to be aware of the fact that there were human beings on the other side. Well, not a single Israeli soldier has been prosecuted by Israeli military authorities. That's a big deal because one of Israel's main defenses against the arrest warrants by the International Court of Justice by the International Criminal Court is that Israel applies what's called the principle of complementarity. That is, the Israeli legal system investigates itself. It doesn't. Israelis have not been investigated for war crimes by Israeli jurists. So it's just not there. Okay? There's nothing there. And there's nothing here. So Israelis are concerned. Israelis know everything that's happening, but they don't have anything to fall back on. They don't have any kind of mental defenses. They don't have any kind of resilience in that sense. The only thing they know is that when they go abroad, they are received very often in hostile fashion. And then they get angry. But we didn't do anything, even if they did. Okay? So the whole thing gets lost in a kind of a very personal interpretation of it. But Israelis know exactly what's happening. They've known exactly what's happening since day one. Most of them approve of it in one way or another. Those who don't are okay with it being done. They don't see any other thing that could be done. And even if they think it's wrong, they don't have any other solution. The code word for the first months of the genocide was the Hebrew phrase "Ma ta metzia." So what do you have to offer? Do you have any plans? Do you have anything to propose? Anything we could do? But be realistic, please. Don't be a romanticist. Don't talk about peace. Don't talk about acknowledging Palestinian humanity because we've seen what Palestinian humanity is. Be a realist, implying that realism entails genocide. Do that for a long enough period of time, just like our grandmothers told us. Frowns stick to your face, You can't frown for too long. It sticks to your face. So it's stuck to our collective face.
Early on in the genocide, the war, I was a pragmatist. I was a liberal Zionist.
I remember.
Yeah, and I was very focused on us winning, on us defeating Hamas, because I have a PhD in military strategy, so I was very focused on that element. So I was always the Mata Metzia. I was always I had hatzaot, and I had suggestions. What are you suggesting? I had suggestions. My suggestion was always that in order to, and a lot of people in the Israeli military felt the same way, that if you take over Gaza and you create an alternate government, that you could create a better political horizon in the long term. And that there were military steps that you could take, taking territory, holding territory, and building a new government on that territory as a solution to this. That would have also involved a lot of deaths in Gaza, but would have built towards a goal. Instead, what we had, practically speaking, was a strategy, to use that word very loosely, that could not have possibly defeated Hamas. There was just no way you can defeat Hamas by not taking over all of Gaza, by allowing Hamas to continue to rule Gaza. And instead, the focus switched. Early on, it was on destroying Hamas units, probably, but this focus switched to killing civilians. And so when this alternative was suggested, that was pragmatic was rejected. And I still don't know exactly what to make of that. I mean, from Netanyahu's perspective, he didn't want to have a Palestinian state. But from the perspective of other Israelis who actually care about Israeli security, who actually don't want to, continue to fight Hamas, who don't want to have terrorism continue, don't Israelis understand that this military strategy never was intended to defeat Hamas? That when you talk about pragmatism, there's absolutely nothing pragmatic about what Israel has done.
Nothing pragmatic at all. And I'll throw my 2 cents into the mix and say that even before developing a strategy to destroy Hamas, Israel could simply have stopped, taken care, purified Israeli territory, captured all the Hamas people who were there, put them in prison, then figured out what to do, like get an international coalition in place, like have an orderly plan, like have it be cleared and vetted by the people who would provide support. That wasn't what happened. Israel started carpet bombing immediately, at levels that were completely unprecedented for Israel. I know this because I was friends with the man who commanded Israel's air defense for a while there. Israel began immediately acting in unprecedented fashion. And in a way, that was probably one of the obstacles for the path that you're talking about, because it's like it takes what 24 hours to turn an aircraft carrier because it's so big, or 12 hours or 16 hours, whatever. Once Israel started, it was very, very difficult to stop. It was difficult to stop first because there seemed to be overwhelming support, okay, not just from Israelis, but from the world. And you need to take that into account as well, because there was an entire world that came here and basically said, have at them, kill them all. We're not going to bother you. There was an American administration that said as much, even though its officials may have tried to intercede, but they didn't really. And there was Europe. There was the West that basically said, "You're living out our fantasy. You get to kill the brown people." We don't have um, the political backing for this. We don't have the tragedy that allows us to do this and get away with it. But you guys go ahead. You're doing it for us as well. And Israelis were outraged at what happened on October 7th. They were shocked. They were outraged. And it's not necessarily that the pragmatic plan was soundly rejected, as the fact that it was simply applied so broadly, so indiscriminately, that at one point, and I don't know if that point can ever be traced, at one point it stopped obeying international law, if it ever did. Maybe it never did. Let's assume that it did. At one point, fairly soon, it stopped obeying international law, and once it did that, it never looked back. Think of a kind of a Bonnie and Clyde vibe, okay? Think of what's the first song on Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska called, about the guy who went on a killing rampage with his girlfriend, and he describes what he did to the judge. He says, I'm not sorry about the things we done, because for a little while there, she and I had some fun. That was, Israelis could let all the cats out of all the bags suddenly, and we had approval, because that's what Israelis want the most. Israelis want to belong. Israelis want to be accepted. They want to be, the Western. Hmm? We had that. We had that, and we got to do the worst thing we could possibly have thought of doing, which was kill them all indiscriminately. And again, do that for long enough, it becomes its own virtue and its own justification. Killing them all shows that you're dedicated to what you're doing. And especially if you back down, if you say, I made a mistake, this aerial sortie got out of hand, we killed all these families and all these children by mistake, we'll look into it. Bad things happen in a war, but this should be acknowledged, singled out. We should come clean about this. If you did this once, then maybe you could have stopped, but you didn't even do it once. I don't remember how many years ago it was that Israel killed a prominent member of Hamas by shooting a missile through his kitchen window and killed his family because it was there. And there was a commission of inquiry and conclusions were drawn. Of course, nobody was convicted. Nobody lost promotion or anything, but there was at least some circumspection, some soul gazing. Here, there was the whole daddy's home algorithm. We wanted to hit them at home because we knew that was, we were certain when they would come back. And again, you do that for long enough, you let yourself get away with killing women and children. You don't discriminate. You don't provide civilians with the defenses that they deserve. And the immediate effect is that you just lose it. It doesn't come back. You do it for a month, it gets harder. You do it for 2 months, it gets harder. After 3 months, you don't even think about it. Your challenge is to get the senior Hamas operative, and you'll do whatever it takes to get him. And if some Palestinians die while you do it, so what? They deserve it. They shouldn't have started. It's really, I'm applying a sort of a reductive logic to it, but I really think that's the case here, not just because I'm a firm believer in Occam's razor, because it just describes human modalities very accurately. If you watch your weight, an experience that I've had in life, you can decide that you have cheat days, but then this has always happened to me ultimately. My cheat days would get more and more frequent. And the more and more frequent they got, the days where I adhered to the strict diet I undertook got less and less frequent. It just flips on you. You don't necessarily have control over it. It's not, I have these arguments with people from all over the world on Twitter when I'm so inclined, which is not often these days. But these good people on Twitter who really want Israel to be a good guy, really want Israel to be playing for the good guys, to have rhyme or reason, or at the very least, to be a good villain, to have a rationale, for this to be an Avengers movie, not just crazy and completely random. And they argue with me that, of course, there has to be a plan. Israel attacked Gaza because it wanted Gaza back to settle. I think that's preposterous. Sure, there are people who want to settle Gaza. Will they settle Gaza? I highly, highly doubt it. The great majority of Israelis don't support the settlers, and even if the settlers wanted to enter Gaza, what would they settle exactly? Israel has rendered Gaza completely unlivable. There's things that just are not part of the way human beings behave. And that's what happened to us. We lost our humanity. We didn't lose it with a bang. We lost it with a whimper. We didn't decide on it. We don't hate Palestinians with a bloody passion. Sometimes we do. Most of us don't. We don't like them, but we don't hate them. We just feel like they had it coming. It's like that Chicago song. All the people who describe, all the women in prison who describe what they're in for, all the murders, with the chorus being the line, they had it coming. Okay? Some Palestinians had it coming. That's
You
it.
know, how much of this has to do with Jewish history, the specter of anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, and how much of this is just the kind of ethnic conflict that we see in the Middle East all the time that gets very bloody and involves war crimes? I sort of have trouble unpacking how much of this is a uniquely Jewish phenomenon and how much of this is just Israel being part of the Middle East.
Certainly, it has a lot to do with Israel being a part of the Middle East and setting the tone in the Middle East for a long time now. In fact, being a kind of a regional hegemon. But it's also profoundly Jewish, not so much, I think, with regard to Jewish history, but more with regard to the special relationship between Israel and Jews who live outside Israel. The fact that Israel is both a great rupture and a dream fulfilled. That Israel is really very, very different from Jewish communities that exist in other part of the world. But it's also the place where to which they turn all their dreams. So you've got these American rabbis who come out in support of Israel, who talk about from the river to the sea is a death chant, and that is what breeds anti-Semitism and should never be tolerated, and so on. And you've got people all over the globe who do that. I think that's part of it. I think Israeli Jews are particularly ornery. Israeli Jews are stubborn. Israeli Jews pride themselves on their pig-headedness. We like thinking that we are special, that we are a miracle, that we have the resilience and the will and the willingness to work hard. And because of all of that, we did what we did. And also because, we're the ones who took advantage of what the world owed us. We leveraged it. We got the best of the world by being the ordinary, stubborn, difficult people that we are. And we appreciate that about ourselves. And the more we get, the more surrounded we become. The more we get pushed back, the more forced we are to circle the wagons, the more we're willing to embrace that, the more we're willing to see. I mean, I'll give you an example that really, just because it's so minor and of no consequence, boggled my mind. Haaretz has a blog where Israelis who immigrated write columns about life abroad. And one of the women who writes there moved to Sunnyvale in California about 5 years ago. She's not coming back. And she's very educated and well spoken and well read. And she started her column, which was all about the American family living all over the continental United States and coming together only at holidays, which is so profoundly different from the Israeli experience. She started her column by saying, I went into town, and the minute I saw all the red and green decorations, I started looking for the complementary black. And then some nice people calmed me down and said it wasn't against us, it was just Christmas. Now, now this might be a joke, okay? But even if this is her idea of a joke, that shows you how completely preposterous this Israeli trek is. How willing we are to just detach ourselves from the rest of humanity and occupy whatever is left in glorious solitude. That's all we want. We want everyone should leave us alone. Because everyone who doesn't leave us alone, everyone who doesn't let us get away with anything we want, is our enemy. That's the place where we have ended up. Now, that's a horrible place. It's a place that it breaks my heart on a daily basis. It's a place that does not allow for any kind of meaningful communication between Israelis and people who are not Israeli. It's a place that flattens the mind, that forces you, again, to live in a two-dimensional ghetto. And I'm not even talking about the horrors, and I'm not talking about the criminal depth of the Israeli collective psyche. It's all there. It's all documented. Everybody should be prosecuted. Everybody should be punished. I'm talking about what it is to be an Israeli with some critical capacity in the midst of this. And it's a horrible, horrible experience. And again, I don't think I deserve any pity. I think of myself as an integral part of this genocidaire society. I mean, I know that I resist to the best of my ability, but I also know that this is an albatross that I will carry for the rest of time. And that's right and proper. I should. All Israelis should. But it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see people I held in high esteem talk in ways that just chill me. I mean, I'm using my cancer to get out of meeting people because I know that at some point those people will say something that will just make me freeze and I won't be able to gloss over it. I don't get into violent arguments anymore. I don't interact with my countrymen. But I feel like something is taken from me every time I encounter what we've become, and it just keeps getting worse.
Can you tell us a little bit about how people with your opinions are treated in Israel?
We're not a part of Israel. I mean, it's not that we're actively ostracized. We're not seen as enemies or as fifth columnists. We're seen as insane. As people who have just really lost it completely and are therefore not worthy of wasting one's time on us. So your moderate Israeli, if he hears what I think or if he reads me or whatever, he will raise an eyebrow and go on his way, which is exactly what he would do if he heard egregious reports from Gaza about criminal Israeli behavior. I am mark the extreme part of the spectrum. And a major part of collective Israeli psyche's coping mechanism is pretending that this is all normal, that this is all within acceptable parameters. I am a pick-me Jew. I'm a self-hating auto anti-Semite. I'm all that stuff. And there are people who still take the time to cuss me out, but there are fewer and fewer. Most of them are from abroad because I tweet in English and I don't. And for some reason, people don't come after me on Facebook. Again, because I guess because I'm eloquent, and also because I make it clear I'm not interested in engaging with them. Because this is also part of the Israeli collective psyche at the moment. There's this fiction that Israel is split down the middle between liberal Zionists and conservative Zionists, with the liberal Zionists just wanting an end to the war and wanting a commission of inquiry and responsibility to be addressed and apportioned, and the conservative Zionists just wanting to kill Palestinians. That's a lie. They're pretty much the same. They all support the continuation of the genocide if they find it necessary. And they're all getting more and more reactionary in terms of the world hating Jews. And this isn't about what we're doing in Gaza. It's about a hatred that's as old as the world itself, and so on.
And it's kind of what I was talking about with that kind of reflected back. Any negative reaction is got to be this old anti-Semitism hatred that's rearing its ugly head again. And that's kind of why I mean, Shael was talking about how this seems to have hit around the 80s, and I lay a lot of this at the feet of Netanyahu, because it seems like he was definitely feeding into the aggression from the Palestinian side by the way he was treating both the way more moderate leaning at the time Palestinian Authority versus how he was treating Hamas, literally funneling them cash in these nice briefcases.
He sure
So
was.
it seems to be pretty clear the plan was to cycle this extremism to create as much right-wing sentiment in Israel as possible so he could hold on to power. But this seems to be burning Israel in the process.
He sure was, and he sure is. But he also has a lot of willing accomplices who would normally
Yeah.
who would normally tag themselves as liberal Zionists. I mean, the fact that he is the only person of importance in Israel. There's this story I wrote about because it just bugged the hell out of me. Before his 20-point plan um, was accepted, there was this big demonstration against him in Tel Aviv that was attended by Witkoff and Kushner. And one of them mentioned his name. And after his name was mentioned, the crowd booed. There were like 80,000 people there. And for a week, that same crowd went at it repeatedly about whether that boo was appropriate or it wasn't appropriate, because he is a prime minister and he did bring them and they were his guests, and without him, we wouldn't have this. It's like the only thing anybody can talk about here is Netanyahu. Any other leader, any other member of the opposition is immediately seen as, at best, a milquetoast, replacement. Not even a replacement. Just a cheap impersonator, basically. And they all say exactly what he says anyway. They all support destroying Hamas, which is code for destroying Gaza. They all support Israel's complete freedom of action in the Middle East. There's no difference. There's no daylight between them. So you're right. It is Netanyahu, but it's Netanyahu because Netanyahu knows Israel and he knows Israeli. And it's a
I mean,
perfect
the whole
symbiosis.
conflict is exactly that. It's this cycle of extremism influencing extremism. If you go all the way back to like 1948, and the cool off periods have all been when people have started to try to embrace peace from both ends. And so that seems to be like the strategy of saying no peace under any circumstance is to kind of force it
It's mostly
Netanyahu's way.
it's mostly about sowing discomfort. It's making sure that nobody's good with anything that happens. Everybody's prickled by something. And again, when this happens for a long enough period of time, you've now got semi-senior echelons in the IDF who have been rapidly promoted throughout this process. And they don't think of it in moral terms. They think of it as a set of challenges. We have to get every Hamas operative who participated in the events of October 7th. That's a riddle for you. It's a puzzle that you have to unwrap. Does it matter what we do to get him? It doesn't. We have to get every Hezbollah operative who ever pressed the button on a rocket launcher. Why? Because that's vengeance, and vengeance is ours. So we need to strike in the heart of Lebanon if need be. So it all becomes this elaborate grid of challenges and riddles that are all professional, all logistical, all about getting the right vehicles up in the air at the right time. It's a series of riddles waiting to be solved. There's nothing about morals. There's nothing about peace. There's nothing about a future. It's a day to day operation. And it's a huge, huge, huge military industrial complex. Huge. The only one that still functions, the only one that's still powerful. So, yeah, all the time, every time, all the time.
So I've been looking a little bit at your academic work, like your book "Faith in Politics." How do you think the theology of Israeli politics has influenced the genocide that we're seeing and the current state of affairs? Are statements like the Amalek statement um, just flowery dressing for something that's more political, or are there genuine divine elements, theological elements behind the Israeli violence?
It depends on who you ask. There are a lot of people who represented government by people like by Smotrich, who really are talking about a divine sense of redemption. We just had for Hanukkah, we had one of these rabbis disseminate very widely something called the Scroll of Resurrection, Megillat Tkuma. He talked about it had 8 chapters, one for each day. He talked about the great miracles that brought Israel to the victory in this war. For example, the miracle of Hezbollah not joining Hamas in the attack, or the miracle of, without any mention of what Israel did in Gaza, without any mention of the genocide or the crimes or whatever. So you certainly got people who are seeing direct divine intervention. Most Israelis aren't, the best of my knowledge. And by the way, the people who are seeing direct divine intervention are people who want Israel to be much more Jewish than it is democratic. They want a much more prominent place for their kind of Judaism in public space. But they're not well liked, and they will never be a national movement. Most Israelis don't think about it in theological terms. Most Israelis think about it in terms of fuck around and find out. That's still the predominant logic here. Yeah, so all this theology is great for my book and for my dissertation and stuff, but as far as most Israelis are concerned, that's not their main motivating factor.
But we do have a stranglehold by people who think that way on the Israeli government.
We do to some extent, and they're the ones who are leading what's happening in the West Bank, for example.
Yeah, and that can push back a little bit on what you said before about there being no real difference between liberal Zionists. But it's not even a question of liberal Zionists. It's sort of like different shades of right wing. I feel like
Yeah,
I feel like
exactly.
there were a lot of times when most people in Israel, including most of the cabinet, wanted to end the operation in Gaza, and you had Smotrich and Ben Gvir basically holding the government
I don't.
ran.
I don't. I don't agree with you. I don't think most of the
Okay.
cabinet wanted to end the operation in Gaza. I
Well,
think most of
to have a at
they
least to
they
have
just
a
they
return
didn't
of
have a
hostages.
they didn't have a theological reason. No, I think they wanted to milk it for all it was worth. And you're right. I'll take it back a notch. There's a difference between Smotrich and liberal Zionists, but effectively, the liberal Zionists serve in the military that does Smotrich's bidding. They haven't stopped serving in it. You know, you've got fighter pilots demonstrating in their hundreds against Netanyahu in the afternoon, and then reporting to their squadrons in the morning and bombing the hell out of Gaza. So it all amounts to the same thing. And you've got the people who are supposedly the standard bearers of liberal Zionism constantly engaged in proving how loyal they are to the state and how Israeli they are. And so you're right, there is a difference. And if the religious people win, then Israel is going to be a worse place for people of my ilk. That's true. There is a difference. But effectively, as far as the genocide, there's very little difference.
Well, there is the theory that this is the genocide of liberal Zionists on the counter side, because the vast majority of the people killed were killed by pilots with the support of intelligence. Those are the elements that quote unquote represent the liberal elites in Israel, they're the
It
ones
just
doing the major dirty work in killing Palestinians. That's on the other hand.
That's very true. And also, again, look at the West Bank. You've got the militant settlers conducting pogroms in Palestinian villages, and you've got the IDF coming in and basically assisting them. Now, you can't really complain or be surprised. That's the IDF's mandate. The IDF is a Jewish military set up for the defense of Jews. If you've got a situation where you've got fighting Palestinians and Jews, the IDF will shoot the Palestinians every day of the week, regardless of what the Jews did. That's Israel. And what it does is reveal the very elaborate weave of fiction that's at the heart of Israel as a democracy, certainly for Palestinians. A lot of decisions to be made, but first of all, the killing has to stop. The killing and the massacres and the attacks and the land theft, all of that has to stop. Aid has to enter. Gaza needs as much aid as possible for the coming winter. This is all very urgent, very, very tangible, very much in the now. We've been talking about, the broad points, but this is also very narrow and very specific. And the fact is that most Israelis don't care. They don't care. Some Israelis are actively pro allowing the Palestinians to freeze their ass off. But most Israelis don't care. They will tell you it was the Palestinians' choice. They made it. It's not our responsibility. And every time you have a liberal Zionist saying something like that, there was a case with a journalist who used to work for the Marker named Amitai Ziv, who tweeted, he was like, I'm asking a genuine question, so don't be mad at me. But as long as aid keeps going in, why is it our fault that Gazans are freezing? What's our responsibility? They're our enemy. And people were like, dude, aid hasn't gone in for 2 years. We've been starving them. We've been denying them aid. We're like, he's like, why are you so hostile? And somebody wrote, because every time with you, it's an entire history seminar. Every explanation we give, we have to start at the beginning. It's just get a grip. Just, be with it. Have some knowledge of the facts on the ground. No, it's like every day is a violent restart. And it's weird and heartrending and very, very unpleasant to be an Israeli here. I mean, I'm an Israeli patriot. I live here. I want to live here. This is my country. It's my culture. It's my language. I'm not even talking about my kids and my family. But I don't have any other place. I mean, I could probably pass for American, and I'm at a stage where if I wanted a job somewhere, I could get it. But I don't want it. And even that, by the way, is weird. I appear regularly on Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera pays, like other communication outfits, pays interviewees per performance. Israeli banks are not allowing me to accept money from Qatar, so Al Jazeera is not working with me until I open a bank account somewhere else. Luckily, my dad, before he died a few years ago, his wish for us was to get a foreign passport. So I have a Polish passport, so I'm working on it. That's the only reason I want that passport is to do it. But I can't even work because I receive money from Qatar as opposed to billions from us. It's just a very weird place, very disorienting, weird place, coming apart at the seams, gradually coming apart at the core. A very unpleasant experience being an Israeli right now.
Let's try to figure out where Israel is going. What is next? What's the future? If everything is so bad, where's it going?
We'll do that, and then I have to go take care of my kids.
Yeah, I was looking to sum up with that. Yeah.
That's cool. I don't know where Israel is going. I think the best case scenario is that we are sanctioned and we have a change of leadership and we get to sit in the dark for a few years and have nobody consult us or ask us. That we have everything taken away from us. We have Gaza taken away from us. We have the West Bank taken away from us. That we are forced to begin negotiations on the creation of a Palestinian state. And that we have absolutely no discretion as to our political future in terms of what's happening outside Israel. That we deal with our own bullshit, okay, for a few years at the very least. There's a lot to be said for Israel, but Israel has to make a change. Israel has to make a strategic change. And I guess you can sum up that strategic change with one word, and that word is supremacy. Israel has to forgo its supremacy or its pretensions to supremacy. Once Israel accepts that it is a player among other players, then all sorts of things can happen. There are a lot of ways of demonstrating that, but Israel has to do that. Israel has to bow its head. Israel has to accept the inevitable. Israel is far from accepting the inevitable. Once Israel does that, I think the world is still very positively inclined towards Israel. I don't think the entire world is turned against us. I think a lot of people want to judge us with lenience, but we have to demonstrate that we are receptive to that and we understand that we are being received and addressed leniently. So far, we don't even show a remote sign of that. The best case scenario, and in a way, it is what's happening now, is that things are gradually being taken away from us. Gaza is being internationalized, regardless of whether Turkey will be there or not. I think they will be. The Syrian Foreign Ministry today released a map of Syria that doesn't have the Golan Heights on it, which to me means one thing. They were told by Trump, let them have the Golan Heights and we'll get them out of your hair. Okay? Which is what I think is happening. And the Lebanese prime minister announced that the Lebanese government will finish disarming Hezbollah south of the Litani River in days, which is what Israel wanted. So things are actually happening, and Israel won't be able to pursue this for a long enough time. Israel is at the end of its rope. It's high on fumes now. There's no gas in the tank anymore. And the best that can happen is that we run out of fumes as well, and that we are forced to just sit there and accept it. Maybe that will bring in some element of reckoning, or will create a space that will allow some kind of reckoning.
Is there an Israel without supremacy? What do you think of the idea that Israel is based on supremacy?
Israel as it stands now has no right to exist. No. The Israel that I was born in, the Israel that I was raised in, the Israel of the past 2 years has no right to exist. I don't think Israel has a right to supremacy. Maybe as an initial stage where you create two states that ultimately come together, or you create a confederacy. Or I'm sure there are creative solutions there, and I think that the Jewish public would want a Jewish state initially to be persuaded that a single state would not turn into a bloodbath, which is what people here keep saying. And again, there's so much bad blood. If I was a Palestinian, I wouldn't trust an Israeli farther than I could throw him. And the same said for Palestinians. There's so much bad blood. Time needs to pass. Time needs to pass. The reconstruction needs to begin. We don't have to heal anything. We don't have to fix anything. We don't have to unite about anything. We just have to work and shut up. It's basically it. And try and fix ourselves from within. That's as good as it gets now.
Thank you so much, Ori. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Right. It was amazing.
Sure, my pleasure.
Appreciate you coming.
It was my pleasure.
Tia
And I'm
Marie.
happy whenever you want me. Tודה רבה.
That means
Have me on whenever you like.
Happy Hanukkah.
We will bother you again.
You
Happy
too. Yeah.
Hanukkah.
Go ahead. Thank you. You too.